So, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our 1 hour webinar about the Shadow Constellations workshop in Sedona. If you happen not to be from that area and not coming, that's also okay. You're welcome to stay, listen, enjoy, and participate. So, thank you for being here today. My name is Neil Esterman. I'm a family constellations teacher, embodied shadow work teacher, and a developer of Shadow Constellations. Who is here from Sedona and planning to come to the workshop, or wondering if you want to come to the workshop? Just to have a sense, can you raise your hand? Okay, thank you. So in about less than 3 months, we'll meet in Sedona. I'll come to the US for the first time in 25 years, and this time on a more professional basis, and also with my family. And this webinar is for you to get a sense of what we'll be doing in the workshop, and some experience of this kind of work that I'm offering of shadow constellations, and for you to have some space for questions and answers. So we'll have time for questions at the end. And if you don't understand something that I say, feel free to interrupt me. If you have a more open question or interest question, please leave it to the end. And yeah, let's begin. So I have a long time fascination with the shadow. What is the shadow? The shadow is a term coined by Carl Gustav Jung, referring to those aspects of ourselves that we have denied, repressed, and disowned. In less psychological words, when we repress something, we are not aware that it is there, that we have it. Okay, so if, for example, I have repressed my anger, I will not be aware when I'm becoming angry or that I'm even angry at all. Yeah, simple. Denial is one step ahead as far as the strength of the defense mechanism. When I deny something, I may be aware that it's there or not, if it is also repressed, but I will strongly defend against the idea that I may have it. Okay? If you want to have a clearer felt sense of how it feels, remember the first and maybe the last time that you try to show, let's say, a romantic partner or a boss, something they were not ready to see about themselves. And how did they react? You remember? They say, thank you. It's so nice of you to be showing me this aspect of myself that I have no wish to see. Or were you blamed? Or were they saying, I have no idea what you're talking about. You're projecting on me and all kind of stuff like that. That's denial. For something to be fully in the shadow, it has to be both repressed and denied. So I have no idea I'm like that. And if you try to show it to me, I will strongly deny it with everything that I have. Of course, not all shadows are full. Sometimes we know that there is something we don't like about ourselves, but we try to hide it. Or we know that we are, let's say, a bit superior, but we don't understand how superior we are because, again, it's a partial shadow. We have some understanding of it, some knowledge, but it's only partial. And when we disown, it means that we are unable to take responsibility or sovereignty over that aspect of ourselves. So for example, many of us disown our power. I'm nice, I'm kind, I'm understanding, I'm helping. I'm not hurting anyone. I will not wield enough power to be able to hurt anyone. So that's a very common pattern with healers, let's say. And which basically means that we're putting our power in the shadow. Yeah. I'm not the kind of person to have this kind of power. Now, why would we do that? That's called golden shadows. It's when we put something that we may like, we think maybe is good in the shadow because we unconsciously connect it with something which we consider bad. In the case of power, it's often the ability to hurt or to be the perpetrator. Creativity often goes to the shadow because of fear of madness or having an unstable life. We'll talk more about it in the workshop, but just to get an idea of what is the shadow. So we can have like more classical shadow, things we don't like, we despise, we think are bad. And we can have golden shadows, which are things we think are good, but we're not willing to be in touch with them because they're connected to something that is not so good. One of the reasons I'm interested so much in the shadow, even before I met constellation work, is because I realized that almost any deep healing that I went through touched my shadow to some degree. Because things do not just go into the shadow by accident. In the family that we grew up in the culture that we grew up in, there are things which are accepted and things which are not accepted. And as very small children, usually, we learn them. Sometimes we're being told, don't be so aggressive, or don't smile too much to people you don't know. And sometimes we just somehow sense what's possible and not possible, what is accepted or unaccepted in our family, what would make us loved and appreciated and belong, and what would endanger our belonging. So we know from family constellations that we have the order of love or belonging, right? Which basically says everyone who is born or even conceived to a family has the same right to belong, right? Yeah, makes sense? And those of us who are in the field for a while realize very quickly that it's a major principle, and that exclusions or violations of this order usually result in entanglements. What we are not often thinking about is that there is also an inner belonging principle. So all of our self parts have the same right to belong to us. And when we violate that, there are also consequences. However, all of us, to some degree, violate the inner belonging in order to maintain our family belonging. But there's an inherent conflict here in any culture or society that has some ethics, some morals, some rules about what's right and wrong. And we have that. So we sort of cut ourselves into pieces at a rather young age and then try to live life well, despite. And many of the things that afterwards, and when we become more mature and understand what's going on with us, and we try to change and to work with and to heal, have roots in our shadow. That's one good reason to be aware and work with our shadow. Another one, which is, I don't know if it's more practical or not, is that the shadow immensely affects our relationships, all relationships, with partners, with friends, with colleagues, with students, and with clients, and children, and neighbors, and bosses. But in this workshop, we'll take half of the workshop to focus on what happens in our relationship with our clients and students, because what we are not in touch with cannot be fully well held in our space. Okay, simple. When people go out of a constellation or from some form of therapy, unhappy, more often than not, it's not because the technique was not right. It's because something in the relationship with the facilitator didn't work well. they found us impatient or judgmental or trying to force them into something they weren't ready to do, or that we didn't see them, or that we gave them and the representatives too much freedom and we didn't keep the space safe enough, or that we looked at them with too much interest in some cases. Or we wanted something too much for them, more than they wanted. These are the things that usually people are unhappy about. Not just the result, did it work or not work for me. No, sometimes things don't work in one session. But when people get hurt, it's usually inside the relationship. And the places where they get hurt is when we are, or we have been captured into some roles, into some representation for them unconsciously. So we became their unresponsive father or their narcissistic mother, even for a brief moment. Or they brought something into the field that we were unable to hold well. So the constellation didn't go where it could have and didn't reach the depth that it could have. Because, for example, if I have some aspects of sexuality in my shadow, and the sexuality is a part of the topic of a certain constellation, what would happen? Will the representatives and the client be able to bring this aspect to my space? Well, very often the answer is no, they will not be able. They will not even know why, but they will feel they're not able to. In some cases, they will not be even aware that it's there. In other cases, they will try to bring it and I will ignore it. Yeah? You had that experience that you feel that something really important is missing and the facilitator is not willing to see that? Yeah, you had that experience once as participants or clients? Yeah, unpleasant from experience, yet more common than we would like it to be. And again, we have more effect on the space that we hold in our clients or students. And in some cases, some clients would somehow know that we can't handle it and will just go to someone else with their issues because they will unconsciously feel that it won't be safe or it won't be deep enough for them. They may not even have the words for it. You just feel like, yeah, she's not the right person for this topic. Not even knowing why. Yeah. I'll say a couple of words about classical shadow triggerings, just that we have an idea of how far and wide it works. And then I'll take us into some experiential process of shadow constellations, and then we'll have time for some questions. So I usually say that there are like 6 categories of shadow triggering, and they follow trauma triggering for a reason, because the shadow is the child of the traumas of the previous generations. Yeah. So there's a very strong connection between what cannot be touched today and what could not be lived through, or not, or at least not without some dissociation in the previous generations. Is this clear what I just said, or should I give an example? Give an example. Okay. Yeah, I'll take a real life one from my own family. So both of my parents were children during the Holocaust, and my mother was born in the Warsaw Ghetto. And when she was very small, and her father was smuggled out of the ghetto first. He was there in some hiding apartment, and he happened to meet a very nice lady there. And things happened. And one day he came back, and he came back to the ghetto. He asked to be smuggled back to the ghetto to tell his wife, my grandmother, that he got that lady pregnant. And my grandmother threw him down the stairs, not physically, but told him to go too. Despite her being an ill person and physically ill, and my mother being less than 1 year old. One of the things which are completely impossible for me is to even think about betraying my partner. And yes, I like to be a moral person in general. Like, it's not even in my range of options. Okay, it's like we don't do that in our family. That's not an option. We saw the price. Another example could be that your grandfather was a rich person and had lands or property and stuff, businesses, but he was also a gambler, and he lost everything. So now in your family, you don't gamble or you don't take risks, or you have to be very straight and serious about things. Yeah. Um, it can also be less direct. We also have cultural shadows, and cultural and collective traumas lead to cultural and collective shadows. And so things which are not acknowledged on the level of the culture are also limiting our ability to be in touch with certain things. And since we're talking about the US, we can say, for example, that in many ways the US is a sports culture, right? Sports are big. Winning is big. Losing, however, is not big, right? So one of the things that we're really not willing to be in touch with usually, most of us, in the US would be to be a loser. That's a really bad thing to say to someone, right? In some other places, it's just not nice. In the US, it's, oh my God, he told me I'm a loser. This is, I'm not going to accept that. Yeah. If you go to someone in India and tell them that they're losers, they'll be like, well, the gods didn't want me to succeed, you know? They won't take it so seriously necessarily. It's cultural. I took a small example. I know we have worse examples than that, but this is a safe enough one to look at. I can say that for Israelis, being helpless in the collective shadow. We tried it in the Holocaust. It wasn't a good idea. And I can go on with a list of countries, and it would be interesting. We'll touch a little bit on that in the workshop as well. But let me go back to the various ways in which you can get triggered. So one is fight. Fight is when you want to change the other person. Okay. So when you want to shake someone to understand what's wrong with them, that's a fight response. When you want them to die or to disappear from the gene pool of humanity, it's also a fight. But also when you are educating people, you shouldn't be talking like that. You should be dressing differently. Listen, my dear, I really think that it would be better for you if you did a little bit more of that, a little bit less of that. People will like you better. But educating, we do that. If you stop talking to your boss in that way, maybe they would respond differently. Educating. And when you feel like educating someone without them asking for it, you're probably shadow triggered. It's you who don't like the behavior. Another form is flight. When you are triggered by flight, we become more superior and condescending. We don't want, like we dislike, we feel an aversion to the person or to how they behave. And when it's in a romantic relationship, it's like, what am I doing with that person? Why did I marry that person? This came from your side of your family when it's about our children. It's not from my side of the family. We are ashamed of them, and we don't want to work with them if it's a working space. And when it comes to our clients, we either want to tell them, hey, I'm not a good fit for you, or we are waiting impatiently for them to understand that we are not a good fit for them because it's unprofessional to just fire them. But we would like us to separate and to go to different ways. And sometimes it connects, for example, when we have helplessness in our shadow, and the client feels helpless, and it's in their shadow as well. So there is helplessness in the room. The client cannot be in touch with it. We cannot be in touch with it. The result being we feel helpless, but we don't realize it belongs with the client. We're being captured by the unconscious helplessness of the client, and we feel and tend to believe that we really can't help them. And we should probably refer them to someone else who is more professional or more able to work with their issues. In my experience, 80 or 90% of the times when we feel that, it's not because we're taking the mature choice, it's because you're shadow triggered. We can't handle the helplessness, or we can't handle something about a client, so we feel that we should refer them to someone who can, instead of turning inside and doing our own shadow work, so that we can handle it. Another form of being shadow triggered goes to the freeze. This is the closest you get to direct trauma, of course. And in the freeze shadow triggering, we tend to please. We are doing what we believe the clients wants us to do, even if they didn't tell it to us. And we indulge what we believe are their needs or wants without wanting to. It's a tricky one to identify, but it's there. Sometimes when you find yourself waiting for the time to end, so that the suffering will end in a session as the facilitator, that's a sign that you're under a freeze. You're like less able to connect your upper mind faculties with the lower one, and you can still function and talk and do everything semi-normally, but you're actually not fully there. It's a form of dissociation. Another form is faint, which means you get tired, really tired. Your eyes want to close, you yawn a lot, and sometimes you actually fall asleep for a brief moment, and it's the faint response, faint shadow response. And often when we feel that, we think that, oh, I'm tired, oh, there isn't enough air in the room, or the topic may be heavy. Like, yes, it's heavy for us, very heavy. So heavy that something else wants to shut down. The last two types of triggerings are different in nature. They're related to the golden shadows. One of them is called friends, and it's when we become too friendly with our clients. Instead of being the responsible ones, we just want to be their friends, to hang together, and to share gossip, and to talk about our issues, and to ask them for their opinion about things. And when we somehow, although we know that we are the professionals here, and we become same level, and we ignore the power balance. It's a subtle one. Sometimes it's just that we're just taking a cigarette together before we go into the room. I've seen that many years ago. Like, we're okay, we're not doing anything wrong. Well, when we consider clients as friends, there are things that we will not do, because with friends, we don't go all the way. And with friends, we want them to listen to us and not only us listen to them. And when a friend says something aggressive, we take it much harder than when a client says something aggressive. Yeah, it's a different, we organize ourselves differently with friends and clients, or at least we should. The last one, which is less spoken of, but is really important, is about sexual and erotic attraction and romantic attraction. When we disconnect from something in ourselves and put it into the shadow, it leaves a hole, a vacuum. The same way that when a person is excluded, there is an energetic vacuum, right? And this creates entanglements afterwards. So when we dissociate or disconnect from a part of ourselves, We leave a hole inside of us. Most of the time, let's say in the fight and flight and triggering, we want to do something. We realize that the other person is not right because they have in them something that we felt was so bad that we had to disconnect from it. But in this triggering, like we look at the person and say, oh, it feels that together we can be whole. I'm not angry. She knows how to be angry. I feel attracted. If something in me wants to merge. Yeah. And I think it's because she's lovely, or I think it's because she is really beautiful, or I think it's because she is really nice. So I have all kind of thoughts of why is it happening. Yeah. But actually, I feel or see something in her which I lack in myself. It's being more spoken about when clients do that, and clients fall in love, right? Why do they fall in love? Well, yes, someone sees them, but often they would say, you see me like I cannot see myself. You understand me like I cannot understand myself. You have compassion towards me where I don't have compassion for myself. Therefore, I love you. In other words, you have in you what I don't have in myself. Therefore, I love you. Or I'm attracted to you. There's more to say about any of the triggerings. Again, more in the workshop, we'll work with them. Let's do some short experiential work now, shall we? Yeah? Okay. Do you have some items to use as physical representations with you, or do you need a moment to bring them? You have some items. Good. So please choose some object to represent yourself and place it wherever it feels intuitively right, on your desk or on the floor. And then please take a representation for someone that really triggers you, really annoys you, but not because they are actively hurting you. Okay? Just you don't like these kind of people or people who behave in that way. Something. Maybe you have clarity about what is so annoying about him, and maybe you don't have. Both are fine. And place the representation for that person in front of your own representation. And then please step on your representation. Meaning you put your hand on it if you're sitting, or you put it between your feet or under your feet if it's flat, if you're standing. And when you step on a representation for a moment, you put your own structure on the shelf, and you allow the essence of the representation to be in your body. And you don't need to understand anything, just to notice. Notice your body, your breathing, your posture, your sense of weight. Notice if something seems to be pulling or pushing you to any direction. Notice if your body wants to do something. If there is any pain or discomfort. Notice your emotions, if you have any. Your thoughts. Also the content, but also their shape, the shape of your thoughts. Notice if there are any images or photos or scenes in front of your mind's eye. If there are any sounds or sensations that captures your attention right now. Do any memories comes up? Maybe yours, maybe not yours. And finally, pay attention to the triggering person in front of you. How do you feel about them? What do you want to do to them? For them? With them? Do you have any judgments about them? Just notice. And then take a deep breath, step off with your hand or to the floor, shake your hand if you have touched the representation. And then move to the representation of the other person and take a moment to stand in their shoes, noticing how it feels on their side. Their emotions, their body sensations, where their attention is going. How do they look at the world? At your representation. How is their relationship experience from their side? You don't have to understand or agree to anything. Just notice what is coming up for you. And take a breath, exhale, and step off. Shake your hand. Now please add a third representation. This one is for what is so annoying and so triggering about this person. It's okay if you don't have a name for it or an understanding of it. Place it right next to the person representation, like a step away. So they're not touching each other, but they're not far away. They're just a step away. And then go back to your own representation. And notice, is there a difference in how you are and how you feel in their presence? Is there a difference in how you feel about the other person? Where is your attention and intensity? Where is it focused on now? On the person or on this triggering quality, triggering characteristic? It's possible in some cases that the other person is a multi-talent and there is more than one very triggering thing in them for you. In which case, you can add one or two or three more representations next and next and next to each other and reflect that. But don't look for it, only if it feels like, yeah, there's a change in how I look at them, but they're still triggering me. So maybe there's something more. So add that and stay on your representation. Notice what happens as you identify and acknowledge what is triggering in them, what is changing in you in relation to them as you do that. Okay. Now please step off your own representation and go back again to the other person representation. And take just a moment to notice how it feels now on their side. Is there any change in how they feel seen, treated, in the sense of the relationship? Take a breath, shake your hand, step off. Now please add a representation for the exact same characteristic or quality, this time on your side. So next to you, right in front, their triggering characteristic. If you put more than one, then put more than one on your side. So now we have you and the person. Next to the person is their triggering characteristics. And next to you is the same characteristic only in yourself. Whether you believe you have it or not is immaterial. Just place the representation. And step back on your representation. And take a moment to notice what is happening. Where is your attention and focus now? Is it still on the client or the person? Is it on their triggering characteristics? Is it on yours? Even if you're not in touch with them? How does it feel to even place these representations on your side? Sometimes it can be quite shaking or shocking or unpleasant. Is there some recognition or not at all? Look at the other person and notice if there is a change in how you feel about them now and how triggering they are for you now. And then look again at your own triggering aspects. They're probably in your shadow. And notice if you can tell them you are also a part of me. You belong. It's okay if you can't or if it feels fake. Just notice if you can. And if you can, how it feels. Does it change anything? You are also a part of me. You belong. And then turn again towards the person and notice how you feel about him now. Is there perhaps a change in how triggering you feel them to be? And how you relate to them and how you see them? Doesn't have to be. We did just a very initial acknowledgement of one of our shadows. Sometimes it makes a difference. Sometimes more work is needed. But for now, just notice. And you can tell the other person, hey, I also got this. I also have this characteristic in me. Again, if it feels right for you to do so. And then step off, take a breath, shake your hand, and move for the last time for the representation of the other person. And notice how it feels for them now. Is there a change for them in the relationship, in how they can be with you now? Not promising anything, but maybe there is. And you can step off. Take a deep breath, check yourself a bit, finish this short constellation structure. How are you? How was it? What did you find out? Was there any change for you during this process? Yes, no? Any answer? Let me know where you are, please. Kind of difficult on the other side of the screen.
For me, it was my breath was touching what I didn't like in the other one.
Can you
It was my
speak up,
breath.
please? I hear you very...
Yes, this is better.
Thank you.
It was what I didn't like in the other one.
Mhm.
My breath could touch inside of me.
Mm.
So I got a little bit bigger, faster. Was a sensation of the breath.
Mhm. Thank you. And how did it feel at the end towards the other person? Was there any change?
The other person was suddenly included,
Mhm.
and I was not running away or fearing or pushing it away. It was just, oh, it was about me belonging. Suddenly the other person belonged to me, or there was a belonging there between me and the other person.
Exactly.
And I wanted the other person to make me feel belonging to him.
Mm. That's their work.
That was a start. It's their work. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what they have to give me. Yeah,
Yeah. Thank you for
this
sharing
was.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what you just described is this exact connection between the more classical family constellation work and the shadow work. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of the exclusion that is happening has roots in previous exclusions, but some of the roots are in our own self parts that we excluded. And we exclude others as we have excluded ourselves. It's one
What
of
I
the reasons.
liked,
I'm
mhm.
sorry, go ahead.
What I liked was that I could feel it in my breath rather than thinking it out.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah,
was fascinating.
yeah. There are many quite ancient modalities about the person who triggers you just shows you a mirror, right?
Mm.
It's not new,
Mm.
but taking it together with the constellation work allows us to really experientially get in touch and experientially change how we are connected inside of us, and then it immediately affects how we are connected outside of us.
I can still feel that vibration,
That's
that
good.
special quality in my breath which changed.
Mhm.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so we have some time now for either more sharings if you would like to share, any of you, and or any questions that you may have on the workshop in Sedona, and or anything else you want to ask. I'm also okay. And this is what we came for. And the workshop will take place on the 10th and 11th of May in beautiful Sedona. I'm very excited to come there and also meet Engwin and just in person for the first time. Yeah, do you have any questions, anything to share?
Can I ask a question?
Please, Anthony.
Nira, I was just wondering, I'm familiar with shadow, but I'm not so familiar with the word constellation.
Mm-hmm.
Explain that, and how is that different? And I've heard people talk about constellation process, but how is it different than
Mm.
shadow constellation?
Okay. So family constellations developed by Bert Hellinger, at least as we know them, and a modality that focuses on a very phenomenological approach on intergenerational trauma healing and a systemic perspective to healing or living well. And for me, uh, um, I've been doing shadow work or embodied shadow work for about 2 years before I met family constellations. And the moment I met family constellations, um, it was an instant marriage. So maybe so I may find it slightly difficult to say where one begins and the other ends, because for me they're really not disconnected. I would say that in shadow constellations we use family constellations as the working modality to explore both our shadows and our intergenerational and systemic aspects and that lead to that shadow. So we're trying to expand the frame to include not only our family and our culture, but also our self parts. That's one thing. And another thing is that in shadow constellations, the focus is very often relational, meaning we'll look to what is happening in relationship with our clients, with our students first, in my case, but the same perspective and tools are relevant for any other meaningful or even less meaningful relationship. I remember once many years ago, well, not that many, 5, 6 years ago, my daughter, it was late at night. My wife was out of the home, and we have two daughters, and one of them was lying down on some cushion. It was like, "Oh, Daddy, can you please take me out to the room?" And I noticed myself getting really angry, like really, really angry there. Like, why is she so such a victim that she can't just pick herself up and go to sleep? Why is she so helpless? Like, ah! Luckily, I noticed that, and instead of lashing out or saying something less nice to her, I like, okay, there's something here to work with. Took a breath, picked her up, took her to the room, went down, and started working. I gave myself an hour and a half of a constellation that went many places, but it began with me being triggered by her helplessness and victimhood. And I felt good afterwards, and I went to sleep. The next morning, I woke up. It was Saturday morning. It's like Sunday morning in the States, in Israel. And she woke up after I was sitting in front of the computer doing some work, and she woke up and came to me and said, "Good morning, Daddy. I think I'll go now to my room and play a little bit." Now, it may sound normal, but it's the first morning in memory that she woke up and didn't want me to play with her or someone to play with her. Like she suddenly became self-sufficient. And it's not like I told her anything. It's not like she saw me reacting differently to her, so she realized that something was different and allowed herself more. The field changed, the relationship changed. Very often, how people are able to be with us and towards us has a lot to do with our shadow and with our the invisible dynamic that we create in order not to be in touch with what is in our shadow. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Good. Thank you. Yes, please. We have time for one more question or sharing before we finish today. That's your chance. Okay. So if there are no more questions or sharings, I just said there are probably about 20 people registered for the workshop so far. We have probably about 10 or maximum 15 more places. So if you haven't registered yet and you find this work relevant for yourself, you're welcome to join us. If there is anything that you would like to share or to ask me in private and not on a recorded webinar, please feel free to contact me. My email is nir.esterman, esterman@gmail.com. I'm easy to find. You can also contact me through my website, which we already have been through at least once if you're here. Yeah, I'm looking forward very much to meeting you. And you're welcome to let your friends know as well. Thank you for your time today. I hope it was useful for you. I'm looking forward to meeting you when we get to the US, either in Sedona or in Boulder, Colorado, when I will be giving a full 5 days training. Take care until then. Thank you.